When I first moved to Ireland 20 years ago, in 2004, I was more deeply touched, deeply moved by the Irish people, by Irish culture, than I possibly know how to tell you. Um, I really felt then that I had found the most human society that I had ever encountered. And you know what? Despite all that's happened these last 20 years, I still feel the same today. That this is the most human society I have known. Coming soon. 3 hours of video for the love of Ireland. Here is an extended preview of that much longer episode. You could even think of it as the short version if you don't have time for the long version. That's not to say that there aren't, inhuman sides to Irish society, then as now. It's not to say that Ireland isn't deeply fallen, because all human societies are deeply fallen. No, I'm just saying that it was the most human. I've spoken in this channel about the true Ireland or the real Ireland. If you're not thinking about this kind of Ireland that is manufactured by globalist and capitalist forces, where the ultimate power, really resides in the banks, and above all, the Wall Street banks and the banks in the City of London, above all that, but also the media they generate, these giant corporations, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, what Yanis Varoufakis calls techno-feudalism. If you're not with that Ireland, generated by all of that, but you're with what I'm going to dare to call the real Ireland, the true Ireland, you cannot separate it from its profound Catholic heritage. I grew up in America, moved to Britain, lived in England, Scotland, and Wales in Britain, three different, countries right there. Then on the continent, lived in Germany, Switzerland, France, Spain, something like 9 different countries here I've lived in. And Ireland still strikes me this way. If you are awake, maybe because you've lived outside of Ireland or you've travelled outside of Ireland, to the unusually warm communitarian spirit that still exists here, I would also say the humble spirit of the Irish, if you are awake to the very unusual qualities that the Irish still have, I'm going to dare to suggest that even if you do think that I'm full of wacky metaphysics, you can't separate all of that from Ireland's profound Catholic and Christian roots. Ireland cannot be isolated from that. Irish Catholicism, Catholic Ireland is not dead, but that does not mean that it is not dying. Yes, all across this island there are, I know, people carrying on the Irish traditions of going to Mass every day, people praying the Rosary every day. There is still a beautiful and pious Catholic Ireland out there. I fear we're losing in Ireland the memory of what it was. I fear that there's a young generation of Irish growing up, nurtured on, frankly, Anglo-American culture, Anglo-American sitcoms, Anglo-American soap operas, Hollywood movies, and unconsciously they may be beginning to assume that Ireland was the same as other Anglosphere cultures, and it was so radically different. This is my big book. It's got a lot on Catholic Ireland, a lot, but it's not just about Ireland. It's about France, it's about Belloc, it's about the Anglo-Americanization of the world, it's about capitalism, it's about, yes, the Latin Mass and Vatican II. But we're going to just read you something about Ireland. The beauty of Catholic Ireland clutches at my heart, particularly as I have listened to older generations who remember what Catholic Ireland was. These folk remember a culture radically different from the rest of the Anglosphere. Yes, people here still recall and often mourn the integral Catholic culture they knew in their youth. This integral Catholic culture, something of it can be glimpsed in a national survey of the Irish Republic. That survey found that over 90% of Catholics went weekly to Mass, and nearly 47% went to confession once a month, whereas 97% prayed daily. 75% of those who surveyed put up holy pictures or statues in the home. I don't know what's in Irish homes today, I've got a good idea, but not many homes will be filled with images, sacred images. Furthermore, around a quarter of the population went to Mass more than once a week, and a similar proportion went to confession once a week or more. I'd like you to just take that in. The survey is finding that a quarter of the Irish people, a quarter of them, the very devout, went to confession every week, and they went at least several times a week. This will be the daily Mass going that was so part of Irish tradition. Very, very frequent Mass going that I so try to emphasize on this channel. Cynics have tried to paint this extraordinary religiosity as largely social control in a culture where church and state were closely linked. According to them, Irish Catholics simply did what was expected of them by a rigid, hierarchical society. This is often attended by notions of the Catholic Irish as docile and priest-ridden, without the slightest consciousness of the docile, media-ridden culture everywhere in the West today. I find this rich. You find all this commentary about how Catholic Ireland was brainwashed, was docile, priest-ridden, and, without the slightest awareness that modern culture is docile, brainwashed, and, arguably ridden with a different kind of priests, the secular priests, the priests of the, new secular religion, as I call it in my, gentle traditionalist books. What this cynicism misses is how much Irish religiosity exceeded the expectations of the Church. For example, the Church expects yearly confession of us, not more. That's the law of the Church. The Church certainly does not expect weekly confession. And yet, 29% of the Irish population went weekly or more to confession. The Church imposes no obligation to put up holy images or statues, yet 75% did. Yes, all kinds of explanations are given as to why the Irish were religious, but never how the sacramental miracle of the Holy Church might have been operating in their souls. Why did Ireland lose its religiosity? How many different theories I read, including, but not limited to, urbanization, globalization, industrialization, the scandal, terrible scandal of sexual abuse, the power of media elites, but never do I read things like the soul-transforming power of the Church ebbing away after Vatican II. I spoke about how cynics, really materialists, would speak about the change in Catholic Ireland only in terms such as, urbanization, a limited amount of industrialization, yes, the terrible sexual abuse scandals that happened here, the power of the media, the globalization. What I want to say here is that it's not that I'm denying any of that. I'm not. It's that I'm saying it's not only that. So for a materialist, if you don't believe in any transcendent reality, then it has to be, only things like this. It can't be due to something mysterious in the Mass or in Catholicism, the Catholic mystery, as I like to call it. Can't have anything to do with that the Catholic mystery was sustaining Ireland. It has to be explained away. All I'm saying is that there is more going on here. But to understand this more, you have to not be a materialist. You have to be open to the idea that what was holding Catholic Ireland together was something mysterious and transcendent to all of these materialistic explanations. So both and the material factors and something else comes into the equation. What is truly involved in the Catholic mystery? For nearly 2,000 years, billions of souls have been incorporated into the mystical body of Christ. Through 7 sacramental portals, they participate in this body. They enter first through the portal of baptism, and then proceed through confession and confirmation. But if they are sincere, the mystery continues deepening ever afterwards, as they continue to receive, reverently and gratefully, for the whole of their lives, his body and blood into their innermost being. Meanwhile, they continue to be repeatedly cleansed by the absolution of their sins. Moreover, their lives may be further sanctified by the sacraments of vocation, either marriage or ordination, until at last there is the sacrament of extreme unction. These Catholic Irish, these ones who were going to confession, 29% according to the survey, were going to confession weekly. Every week, week in, week out, week in, week out, their souls were being cleansed by the power of the sacrament of confession. If they're going daily to Mass, and something like a quarter of them were saying they were going, several times a week at least, their souls are being affected by that. This is part of what was holding Catholic Ireland together, in my view, and after Vatican II, we all know that confession just disappeared. Let us not forget the sacramentals either. The Rosary is not a sacrament, yet who can calculate the effect of billions of Rosary prayers sent up to heaven? Who can say how much benediction rained down, for example, on humble Irish cottages each night as families took out their beads and began to pray the joyful, sorrowful, and glorious mysteries? What of the apparently simple act of taking a moment to cross oneself with holy water? It might be added that in Ireland, one crossed oneself with holy water not only on entering the church, but also at the threshold of one's own home. The sacramentals, they are not there for nothing. The simple act of crossing oneself with holy water throughout one's lifetime, what does it really signify? Here are faltering words to evoke the immense mystery that stands utterly apart from the common or garden notions of the church as simply a confession, or a congregation, or a community that, sings along and has prayers and singing and homilies and whatever. This is really, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm getting at. The Catholic mystery is more than all these things, the materialistic factors that explain the decline of Ireland. It's more. It's more. Those rosaries that were prayed in every Irish home, they matter. The holy water that was in Irish homes, not just in the churches, it was at the threshold to the house as you came in, they matter. The Irish fields were blessed with holy water. Priests went around Ireland, blessing homes, blessing the fields, blessing, objects, cars, tractors. This is obviously just superstition to a materialist. But if we're not materialists, and we really believe that holy water means something, or that saying the rosary means something, and certainly, all of these sacramentals and sacraments of the church really mean something, then we need to say that what Ireland was a land absolutely steeped and permeated by the Catholic mystery. Many have tried to identify the profound differences between Protestant and Catholic heritage. No need, I think, to recycle all the theories here. However, we may briefly note the atheist sociologist Max Weber, who wrote The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. Weber argued Protestant culture led to capitalism since Calvin's equation of worldly material success with divine favor spurred enterprise. Well-known theory. But of course, keeping in line with this video, what if it's not only that, ladies and gentlemen? It's not only what's going on in the mind, it's also that in Calvinism, you don't have the sacraments. One may also consider the Catholic sociologist and priest Andrew Greeley. Greeley argues that Protestants and Catholics imagine the world differently. Protestants tend to see God as more remote and esteem independence and self-sufficiency more highly according to sociological surveys. Likewise, Catholics tend to see God as more intimate and place greater value on family and community. For this, Greeley cites numerous findings. For example, that Catholics telephone members of their family more regularly than Protestants. But is there any real need for sociological arguments when it is plain that generations of people raised in such different environments will inevitably take on diverging characteristics? For, as the great G.K. Chesterton once remarked, a religion is not the church a man goes to, but the cosmos he lives in. This is my point, ladies and gentlemen. The Irish have lived for centuries in a Catholic cosmos, and the effects of that, despite globalization, despite this massive capitalism, destroying all our natural rhythms and traditions, the effects of that, in my view, ladies and gentlemen, do not simply go away overnight. In fact, I think they're very deeply rooted. But I want to make clear, yes, the sexual abuse scandal that afflicted a relatively small but terrible percentage of, priests in Ireland. Urbanisation, globalisation, all these things matter. On this channel, I'm increasingly speaking of the GAFAization of the world, by which I mean what the French call GAFA: Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon. Sometimes they put an M at the end of it. Microsoft. GAFA is extremely significant in all of this. Techno-feudalism cannot be exonerated here. GAFA cannot be exonerated here. I hope to offer you a burst. It's a burst of joy. It's a burst of gratitude. It's a burst of love for Catholic Ireland. In fact, we're going to call this episode "For the Love of Catholic Ireland." I've done several episodes on Catholic Ireland before. I've also, all my books, including The Gentle Traditionalist that you see behind me, have plenty to say about Catholic Ireland as well. But my videos on Catholic Ireland have more focused on the terrible ravages of global capitalism on Ireland and the destruction of Irish culture through global capitalism. This episode, I intend to be a little bit different. We'll still be aware of that destruction, certainly. But I really want to tell you what has so deeply moved me about this country and these people, the Irish people, ever since I first arrived here in 2004. I've lived something like 13 years in Ireland now. There was a break in between where I went to France and Spain. And when I first arrived in Ireland in 2004, I was incredibly moved by it. Responding to the notion that I'm looking at Ireland through rose-tinted spectacles. There are many Irish people who really cannot see what I see. They say, well, Roger, maybe you don't know the Irish. Well, maybe. But there's another possibility, isn't there? The other possibility is that these Irish don't really know the non-Irish. That they've never really lived abroad, they've never got to know other people, and they rather assume that, people everywhere are rather like the Irish. That's not my experience. In my experience of Zurich, which is the big city in Switzerland where Zwingli was, you could get abused for jaywalking. And, you could get abused for running your lawnmower on a Sunday. And obviously, Sunday was quiet. By contrast, Ireland, with its, more lax and relaxed set of attitudes, easily, and in my view, too easily, fell into the rhythms of Anglo-American capitalism and turned Sunday into capitalist festival, so to speak. You could just go and shop, 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 shop. I mean, there's another possibility as well. Certain people might have grey-tinted spectacles. Spectacles that render the world more bland and colourless. I was therefore talking to these Americans, these Dutch, these English, about Ireland. And what really began to hit me is how much these people had come to respect or love the Irish people. And I mean here the ordinary Irish people, the ordinary Irish Catholics in rural County Clare. Because speaking to these people, I got a sense of, well, what do you make of the Irish? And because I was beginning to be just so deeply hit by the Irish, by Ireland, I wanted to know, what do you make of it? And I got some very striking responses. It was clear to me that these people, I especially recall a couple of Americans, had never encountered anything like Ireland. I recall two Americans in particular who were like swooning about Ireland. And here's a key point. One of them had been here 7 years, and he was speaking to me about the magic of Ireland. And I distinctly remember, I can remember the conversation, I can remember the look on his face. I said something to the effect of, okay, You're telling me you came here 7 years ago, so this would have been the late 1990s that he came. The degeneration of Ireland had not proceeded as far in the late 1990s, and he just said that he just never encountered anything like the warmth of these people, the kindness of these people, the magic of the Irish. And I said, okay, you've been here 7 years now. Is that still the case? I distinctly recall asking him that. Is that still the case? And he kind of smiled, and it's like he conceded something. He said, okay, yeah, yeah, I can see, some of the shadow sides. I can see some of the things that, I didn't see when I first came. I can see faults and failings in the Irish, but he affirmed, no, I still see the magic. What he was speaking about was his encounters with ordinary, Catholic Irish, in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no way to say on this side of the grave, there's no way to be scientifically objective about this. You have to struggle. You have to struggle in your soul. Really think about things. Try to corroborate your experience with others through these processes of trying to pay very careful attention to the Irish and to the people in other countries, whether it's the French or the English or the Swiss. These are my conclusions, for better or worse. I, along with many, many other people, see something remarkable in Ireland. Absolutely remarkable still. Collective perversity of Ireland, this is going to be controversial to many people, is now really truly fed by the greed that's been imported into this country, through the capitalist and consumerist culture. Yes, very much fostered by the Wall Street and London banks. Not the only form of fostering it, but there. Indeed, coming back to paddywhackery, I feel like there's a profit motive here. We can make money by portraying ourselves as idiots, like playing up to this paddywhackery that exists, in the culturally Protestant Anglosphere. We can sell Ireland as something that seems to me degraded. So, for those of you who are thinking that I'm just looking at Ireland as all sweetness and light, okay, I'm not. Because, if you think about it, it should be obvious from what I'm saying that the Irish have responsibility here. Yes, there have been, going back centuries, English anti-Irish propaganda creating forms of paddywhackery. It's in American films as well. Now, you don't need to look too far to find Irish films, Irish media that foster and propagate these stereotyped images of the Irish as kind of amiable idiots, I think, sometimes. Clearly, the Irish have responsibility. At the same time, Ireland is a small country sandwiched in between two far bigger cultures, the English culture and the American culture. It's easy to get overwhelmed by those cultures. And moreover, it's coming into every Irish home. This Anglo-American culture, children, babies, are even receiving it through all the Anglo-American media that comes through our radios, our television, the internet. This is why I speak about the Anglo-Americanization of Ireland like never before. This is what the founders of the Irish Revolution, Patrick Pearse, Eamon de Valera, this is what they were very, very concerned about. This, Anglicization of Ireland. There could be people who might want to take me to task and say, well, it's not simply Anglo-American. Why don't you speak about, globalization? Well, I'm going to tell you why, and it could be a bit controversial, but I often think in the Irish case of globalization as rather an anodyne word, a euphemism, maybe a politically correct word for what's really going on here. Because clearly, the massive, overwhelming effect on Ireland is not so much global, it's Anglo-American. I don't think the Irish are in danger of becoming Russified. you know? Okay, I don't think there's going to be a Chinification of Ireland. All right, we may have some Chinese food, some martial arts, that come from the Far East. I don't really see an Islamicization of Ireland. Yes, there may be legitimate concerns with certain, immigrants here. It's hard for me to speak about. I'm an immigrant myself, and I do believe in immigration for the purposes of mercy and compassion. But no way is Ireland in danger of becoming Islamicized in the way it's in danger of Anglo-Americanization. Like I say, Ireland's not in danger of being Hinduized. But you know what? Through the New Age, there is some kind of danger there. And I think to myself of the American priest, Father Mitch Pacwa, who speaks about the New Age movement as a highly Americanized form of Hinduism. That's a bit simple, but it's a nutshell. It's a nutshell. If you were to say a highly Americanized form of Hinduism and Buddhism, you'd have a pretty good nutshell description of what the New Age is. And very clearly, that is very much taking over Irish spirituality, and it's another, more subtle way, or not so commonly commented on way, that Ireland is becoming Americanized by having this Americanized, Hinduism or New Age spirituality. So in other episodes, I've spoken about the McDonaldization of Ireland. These are common theories about how a country like Ireland is becoming Americanized, but you have to remember things like the New Age movement as well. So, this is why I do want to speak, even though it will be controversial to some, about not so much the globalization of Ireland, although of course globalization does exist, but the Anglo-Americanization of Ireland. There's another obvious way that the Irish cannot be exonerated in all of this, or at least Irish media and government elites, because as I see it, for the last 50 or 60 years, there has been a systematic attempt, and a successful one, by many of these figures to bury the legacy of the founding fathers of the Irish Republic, the Irish revolutionaries of 1916, again, people like Patrick Pearse and De Valera, in disinformation, propaganda, really outright lies. Now, there are complex issues here. We went into some of them in episode 18 on this channel. I had to struggle for years with the 1916 revolution, reading both sides. But rather than struggling with these things, many people are just absorbing, uncritically absorbing images of Pearse and Dev and these people that simply, aren't true or don't do justice to the complex reality here. And I rather fear that the result is to create something of a schizoid state in Irish culture. What do I mean? Well, imagine, ladies and gentlemen, for a moment, what if Americans, by their American education, by their American media, American government, were suddenly told, that George Washington and Benjamin Franklin, these people of the American Revolution and the early American leaders were all like hopeless fools, hopelessly benighted fools. Would it not produce in American culture, a kind of schizoid state where, your country is founded by these people on this philosophy, and you are now being told again and again and again what awful people these were. Something like that has tragically happened in Ireland. And I have to say that whatever the complex realities here, people like Eamon de Valera were of a far nobler nature than anyone I see in today's ruling class, in ruling politicians and ruling elites in Ireland. So yeah, a bit like George Washington, who was a revolutionary, De Valera became the leader of the country for a very long time. So I write, the new country's leader, spending more than 20 years as Prime Minister and another 14 as president, De Valera was a devout Catholic, going to Mass daily. Again, that daily rhythm of Mass that was so predominant in Catholic Ireland. Indeed, in 1928, he experienced a mystical vision of Christ, which profoundly affected him till the end of his days. He spoke about this, hardly told anyone about this, but it's clear, if you read about this at the end of his life, he was still marked by this vision of Christ that happened to him in 1928, even though it was a very, very private thing. He also founded the conservative Fianna Fáil party, whose policies markedly differ from Anglo-American conservatism. I'm speaking here about Thatcher, people like that. Few things illustrate that difference better than a speech De Valera gave on St. Patrick's Day, 1943. The Ireland which we have dreamed of would be the home of a people who valued material wealth only as a basis of right living, of a people who were satisfied with frugal comfort and devoted their leisure to things of the spirit, a land whose countryside would be bright with cozy homesteads, whose fields and villages would be joyous with the sounds of industry, whose firesides would be forums for the wisdom of serene old age. It would, in a word, be a home of a people living the life that God desires that men should live. Dear lector, I invite you to reflect a moment on the electoral prospects of conservative politicians elsewhere calling for frugality, things of the spirit, forums of serene wisdom, and money only as a basis for the life that God desires that men should live. Do not phrases like political suicide spring to mind, yet Eamon de Valera was repeatedly elected leader. Plainly, his dream was no solitary reverie. It inspired countless souls, Irish souls, for half a century. And now it doesn't. Again, there are complex issues that have to be struggled with here. De Valera is criticized for his economic management of the country, for example, because he did believe in a frugal Ireland, an Ireland of things of the spirit, and no doubt people suffered as a result of that at times. Politicians, leaders make mistakes. But this is what I want to say. De Valera was very concerned, I believe, about, again, the Anglo-Americanization of Ireland. He had to tread carefully with America because he had lots of American supporters. But in his economic policies and in everything else, his autarky, he was trying to keep Ireland free of Anglo-American capitalism. This is what I have come to conclude after years of reading all kinds of biographies of De Valera, struggling with the man, thinking about the man. He saw the danger, and he was concerned in a very noble way for what has happened to Ireland, what we see has happened to Ireland, and unlike today's politicians, who try to bury him in, as I say, disinformation, outright lies, he was concerned about something higher and more noble. And clearly, De Valera is not alone in the way he seems treated. All kinds of people who stand for these higher and nobler Catholic ideals, it's necessary to slander them and bury them in lies and distortions. I find myself thinking of John Waters, who has been so cruelly vilified for standing up for the real Ireland. The Irish are fallen and capable of all kinds of perversity, even though I mean everything I say about profound Irish capacities for humility, for this kind of compassionate mourning. We're all in this boat together. If people think that I'm just looking at Ireland through rose-coloured glasses, I hope they will hear that although I stand by all of this, I'm hardly denying other sides to the Irish experience. Just like, I see the miracle of the Catholic mystery as necessary for the world, hardly denying other sides to the Catholic experience. Certainly not unaware of the fallen sides of Catholicism. I'm not unaware of the suffering of those who suffered at the hands of priests in this country. I'm not unaware of the corruption in the Vatican and the kind of people that we have in the Vatican today. So I hope I understand, you know, skepticism about what Catholicism is and Catholic culture is in many quarters, because I had that skepticism very deeply in myself for a very long time. Materialism will lead us to catastrophe. This is Thomberg's message, but we need to have faith that we will not be abandoned. The church will regenerate. And so I know that there may be people, watching this channel. Some of them are into Thomberg, and they may be saying, you know, come on, Roger. Can't you see, all the Cardinal Theodore McCarricks? Can't you see what's the corruption that's going on in the Vatican? Yes, I can see this. I can see this. Moreover, going back many years, as the Irish writer and priest Malachi Martin, he was really speaking about St. John Paul II in a battle with Freemasons in the Vatican. I can't say, how much of Malachi Martin's material is true or not true, but I don't think that he just invented it all out of thin air. Pope Benedict XVI asked, I think it was in his first opening address, to pray for him, lest he flee from the wolves. There are wolves in the Vatican. Wolves in the Vatican, in St. John Paul II's time, Malachi Martin speaks about them as Masonic wolves, very, very linked to capitalism. The book is worth a read. Something is rotten in the state of the Vatican, no doubt about that. My point is the Catholic mystery is far, 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 far greater than anything to do with the present 21st century state of the Vatican. What I want to say is not to deny any of those shadows of the Church. No. I want to say that Catholicism is far, far, far more than any of these shadows. And I think it's coming to Ireland showed me the miracle of the Catholic mystery. It showed me how this people could be warmer, kinder, more humble than any people I have encountered. Whatever their flaws and failings. It showed me the capacity of the Catholic mystery to transform an entire culture. That's what I want to say to those of you who are skeptical of what I'm saying. The Catholic mystery is something far, far greater than anybody in the Vatican, or any, theologians, or any, criminal priests. It's something far greater. And not without hope, because of the very things that I have tried to invoke in this episode. Supernatural grace. Whether it's the grace of rosary prayers, the benediction that comes down from heaven as we pray the rosary, or the divine mercy, the grace of the liturgy, which I trust is going to be restored as the church is regenerated. As Thomberg so eloquently pointed to, there's no hope, really, without grace. Some of you will also know the follow-up to the Gentle Traditionalist. The Gentle Traditionalist returns. These books are both about the Irish situation, although they're also about the global situation. They're about how it's like using Ireland as a prism to testify to the destructive effects of secular capitalism on a country. The real difference with Ireland, ladies and gentlemen, is that it has happened so quickly. Other countries, like England, it happened over the course of hundreds of years, the kind of secularization. But Ireland went in this kind of rapid fire way from Catholicism to secularism, and the books speak about that. They speak about the Irish experience, but they also use that experience to look at the world. So they're not just about Ireland. They have an Irish dimension. And what I want to say is that the second book, many people have found it darker than the first book. It was written after the awful, awful Irish referendum on abortion, but just because it's a darker book, it's not without hope. I don't want to give away the ending to you, ladies and gentlemen, because it is something of a novel, and the ending involves supernatural grace. The ending of the book is about angels. That's all I'm going to say. But everything that I've been saying in this video about Tomberg and the angels and the saints, I suppose that went into the ending of the book. That we need to turn to our Lord, Our Lady, but not forget that hosts of angels of heaven are with us. I'll say this as well. Something else that Tomberg really stresses, and it's an obvious truth of Christianity, but it's helped me that he stresses this. We are never alone. Angels are with us. Saints are with us. Our loved ones, from beyond the grave are with us. The saints of Ireland are here. St. Patrick. And if we're really dedicated in our prayer life, in our sacramental life, again, I so want to emphasize how the Irish went daily to Mass. How Emon de Valera went daily to Mass. We need prayer. We need silence. We need Eucharistic adoration. And we need the sacraments as frequently as possible. And let's not forget these other beings that are with us, including an angel of Ireland. And let us work for Ireland. Let us, in our own very different ways, let us work for Ireland as prayerfully as we can and as fortified as we possibly can by the sacraments of the Holy Church. This extended preview, being merely an assembly of clips, has necessarily been somewhat disjointed and lacking. I hope you may join me then for the full 3-hour version coming this St. Patrick's Day.